The sky doesn't care who you are, but people do. Jackson Reed never expected this moment to become the defining memory of his childhood. At just 10 years old, he sat in seat 2A of the first-class cabin, quiet and composed, the kind of kid who could read for hours without needing distraction. He wore a navy blazer his mother had carefully laid out the night before, a pressed white shirt beneath it, and black shoes polished until they reflected light. His backpack was tucked neatly under the seat in front of him, and on his lap rested a dog-eared paperback 20,000 leagues under the sea. He was traveling alone, but this wasn't his first solo flight. But this would be the one he remembered forever. The aircraft hummed softly around him, a smooth lull broken only by the occasional ding of overhead announcements or the chatter of boarding passengers. The destination was San Francisco. Jackson had visited before, tagging along on business trips with his parents, both of whom carried names that opened doors in the corporate world. His father, Dominic Reed, was the CEO of Reed Aeronautics, a global aerospace giant. Jackson had seen him on magazine covers and news interviews, but at home, he was simply Dad, the man who made pancakes on Saturdays and never raised his voice. That morning had started normally. His mother had hugged him tightly at the gate, giving him a kiss on the forehead and whispering a reminder to be kind, be respectful, and sit tall. He always did. And he always tried to stay out of trouble the way his parents had taught him. But the world had a way of finding trouble for boys like Jackson even when they did everything right. As Jackson settled in with his book, the seat beside him remained empty until it didn't. A woman, mid-30s, tailored black suit, sunglasses still perched atop her head, strode into the aisle like she was storming a boardroom. Her name, as Jackson would later learn, was Miranda Stokes, senior executive at a branding firm that specialized in luxury products. Her life was curated and calculated. Her Instagram bio read aesthetic-driven, success-oriented, unapologetically elite. She had arrived at the gate late, fuming from a flight change and clearly displeased with her new seat assignment. And she wasn't happy to find a child sitting in first class next to her. She sat down with a huff, glancing sideways at Jackson with a slight curl of her lip. He didn't notice her right away. He was lost in a paragraph describing Captain Nemo's submarine. That's when she said it. Not under her breath. Not with any pretense of subtlety. Do they really let your kind sit in first class now? The words punched through the ambient noise like a thunderclap. Jackson froze. His fingers stopped turning the page. His heart ticked faster. He had heard things like that before at school, on sidewalks, in grocery stores when strangers made assumptions, but never like this. Never while he was minding his own business at 30,000 feet. He didn't respond. Didn't look up. He did what his parents had told him to do when faced with ignorance. Breathe, stay calm, don't escalate. But the silence between them grew heavy. Miranda shifted beside him, pulled out her phone, and made a big show of checking emails. When the flight attendants offered beverages, Jackson asked for a juice box, and she rolled her eyes like he'd ordered something offensive. The attendant gave her a sharp look but said nothing. Then the turbulence hit. The plane lurched and Jackson's juice slipped from his hand. A few drops spilled onto Miranda's sleeve. He gasped. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said instantly, his voice soft, almost inaudible. But it wasn't enough. She turned to him slowly, her expression twisting into something venomous. "Do you even know how much this costs?" she snapped, holding up her sleeve like she was showing evidence of a crime. "Did they not teach your kind basic manners?" The words slashed deeper than the earlier comment. Jackson's throat tightened. He gripped the napkin in his lap, trying to blot the fabric, but his fingers trembled too much. Then it happened. The slap. A sharp, open-handed blow to the side of his face, loud enough to stop a conversation 3 rows over. The sting bloomed instantly, heat crawling up his cheek and into his ear. He didn't cry. He wouldn't. Not in front of her. Not in front of anyone. But the tears pooled anyway, hot behind his eyes. He kept his gaze locked on his book, pretending to read while everything inside him cracked. Silence fell over the cabin. No one moved. Until someone did. From 10 rows back, a man stood up. Tall, dignified, calm. Dominic Reed had boarded the plane last, his seat originally listed in another row. He hadn't expected to intervene. Hadn't planned to make an entrance. But the moment he saw his son's face, stunned. Eyes glassy, he knew something terrible had happened. He walked slowly, deliberately, each step measured. People moved aside like parting tides. He didn't yell, didn't raise his fists. He didn't have to. "Are you all right, son?" he asked, voice low and steady. Jackson turned, meeting his father's eyes. He gave the smallest nod, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm okay, Dad." Miranda blinked. It took her a second to realize what was happening. Who this man was. Dominic Reed. Not just any father. The Dominic Reed. A man whose company designed half the plane they were sitting in. A man who dined with senators and advised presidents. She paled. "If this is a misunderstanding," she stammered. "He spilled juice on me. That's all." "No," Dominic said, his eyes never leaving hers. "You hit my son. Nothing justifies that." Around them, passengers shifted in their seats, cameras held low but recording. The flight attendant reappeared, her face tense. "Mr. Reed, we're so sorry," she began, already pulling her earpiece to communicate with the captain. "We can move you and your son to another part of the plane if you'd like." "No," Dominic interrupted. "She moves." The words landed like a gavel. Miranda looked around for support. There was none. Even the man across the aisle, who had been silently sipping his scotch, now shook his head at her. The judgment was complete. With no grace, no dignity left, she gathered her belongings and was escorted to the back. The first-class cabin watched her go without a word. Dominic knelt beside Jackson. "Let me see," he said gently, brushing his fingers over the red mark. "I'm sorry this happened to you. You didn't do anything wrong." Jackson bit his lip. "I didn't mean to cause a scene." "You didn't cause this," his father said. "You were the scene, and you handled it with more grace than most adults would." He pulled out a cloth handkerchief, the kind he always carried, and wiped Jackson's face with care only a parent can give. They sat the rest of the flight quietly, side by side, watching clouds drift past the window. But Jackson wasn't the same. Something had shifted. Something inside him had grown stronger, not from the slap, but from the way his father had stood beside him. By the time the wheels touched down in San Francisco, the world had already begun to notice. Videos of the incident were circulating. News headlines appeared within hours. "Woman slaps 10-year-old in first class, didn't know his father was a billionaire CEO." Jackson Reed, 10, teaches nation a lesson in grace and strength. There were interviews, talk shows, think pieces about racism, classism, and dignity in public spaces. But through it all, Jackson remained grounded. He stayed home from school for a few days, not out of fear but to think. Dominic asked him once if he wanted to respond publicly. "No," Jackson had said. "I just want people to stop thinking someone doesn't belong just because of how they look." His father smiled. "Then we'll help them see." Miranda Stokes was placed on indefinite leave. Her company issued a public apology. But none of that mattered to Jackson as much as the quiet conversations he began to have with his classmates, with teachers, with other kids who had stories like his. One day, his school counselor asked him how he was feeling. He thought about it and said, "Strong, but still figuring it out." That was honest. That was enough. Months passed. The world, as it always does, moved on. But Jackson didn't forget. He couldn't. Because in that moment, when the world told him he didn't belong, his father reminded him he did. And more than that, he always had. This wasn't just a story about a slap. It was a story about a child learning that dignity isn't something given to you, it's something you carry, even when others try to take it away. And Jackson Reed? He carried it like a badge of honor. Wherever he went, he walked a little taller. And when people asked what happened that day, he simply said, "I was seen. And I stood tall." The journey wasn't over. It was just beginning.